So, ADHD is being diagnosed a lot more frequently now. There's a real trend with it at the moment that I'm noticing. And a lot of the people that are being diagnosed are women, adult women. Maybe I'm just saying that because I work predominantly with adult women, but I'm hearing a lot of this happen. Pretty much every second person that I speak to when I first start working with them is that they're going through this process of being diagnosed, or they've just been diagnosed, and they're trying medication, or they're thinking about getting diagnosed. And so I want to have a conversation today around, okay, let's talk about ADHD, but let's talk about it from a much more holistic perspective and understanding the biochemical, but also understanding the emotional and how the two are interconnected with each other so that we can actually create more balance and overall well-being. Because one of the things that's happening is people are going and getting diagnosed and then getting medication, but there's then not a conversation around what do we need to do to actually create the balance of these neurotransmitters in our system so that we can actually manage this condition a lot more effectively, not just with medication. And so that's really important. And this is the conversation I feel is being missed. And so this is often where I step in this role, is because I'm working with women looking at the biochemistry. I'm looking at the diet, and with that we look at diet, we look at lifestyle interventions, we look at stress, we look at trauma, and where our nervous system's functioning and how that impacts the symptoms of ADHD. And that's really important when we're having a conversation around what can we actually do to make this better and make your quality of life better. Okay, so I'm going to go through the biochemical perspectives. I'm going to talk about all the different neurotransmitters. I'm not going to go into heaps and heaps of detail, but just enough so that you have like a level of understanding, and then talk about, okay, what can we do through diet, lifestyle, and working through our emotional wounding and traumas and regulating our nervous system, the emotional, to actually be able to really address these issues and feel like the symptoms are a lot more manageable. I have a lot of ADHD clients, and what I know to be true is when I apply all the principles that I use with everyone I work with, and we look at things like what do you need as the individual, the symptoms become a lot more manageable. And they may be medicated, and some are medicated and some are, others are not. So I've got a mix of both. I have, and I'm never one of those practitioners that's going to say, no, don't medicate. That's a personal choice. But we have to also then go, okay, well, does that work for you? Because a lot of people could then go and take the medication and doesn't feel like it works. Or they don't like the side effects, and the side effects are worse than the symptoms. And other people, it works really well and it makes a big difference to the quality of their life. And either way, we're still looking at what do we actually need to do to actually support you. Okay, so first of all, I just want to make a distinction. Neurotransmitters are chemical messengers. So are hormones. The difference is that neurotransmitters are chemical messengers for the nervous system, and hormones are chemical messengers for your endocrine system. Okay, and some crossover, right? So with ADHD, there's like an imbalance in the brain's chemical messengers, in the nervous system's chemical messengers, which influence attention, motivation, and emotional regulation. Yes? So two of those neurotransmitters are dopamine and norepinephrine. Now I'm putting these two are put together because when you look at a neurotransmitter chart, if you want to go and Google a neurotransmitter chart, you can see all of the pathways that are involved for making neurotransmitters, and you will see, I've got mine open up here, that dopamine and norepinephrine are very close together, and you actually need dopamine to make norepinephrine. It's like part of the pathway. So I'm going to talk about both of them together. Now, dopamine helps regulate motivation. It helps focus. It helps with pleasure. It's the pleasure reward neurotransmitter, and where norepinephrine sharpens your attention and your energy levels. It's also involved with vasodilation in the stress response. They're both involved in the stress response, like the fight or flight response. Dopamine not as much, but they will act as a neurotransmitter and a stress hormone, right? So with ADHD, there's a low level or inefficient signaling process with these with neurotransmitters that are very linked to ADHD symptoms, including inattention, impulsiveness, challenges with starting tasks, finishing tasks, being organized, all that kind of stuff. And so there are medications that are used which are stimulants, which are amphetamines, and you probably hear people talk about dexamphetamines or Ritalin, which is to create stimulation and increase the availability of the dopamine and norepinephrine. And everyone's a little bit different with what works, and this is also down to the chemistry with what's happening in the nervous system, right? Because everyone is a little bit different. So when we're looking at it from a diet perspective, and I look at my little neurotransmitter chart, we actually want foods that are really rich in tyrosine, which is an amino acid, because tyrosine is further up the ladder, and we need good levels of tyrosine to be able to make dopamine and then make norepinephrine. So sometimes there's issues with the conversion, and when tyrosine gets converted, you actually need good levels of B6. But tyrosine, let's go back to the amino acid, is found mostly in animal products, but in some nuts and seeds as well. It's really important. Eggs, dairy, chicken, fish, nuts and seeds, and it's one of the precursors, right? When there's another neurotransmitter called GABA. Now, GABA ties in with another neurotransmitter called glutamate. Now, GABA is the brain's calming neurotransmitter. It's relaxing. It calms the stimulation down. It's a relaxing neurotransmitter. And glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter. And so glutamate's really important for learning and memory. And what we really need is a balance between the two. Okay. Now, with ADHD, often what happens is there's an overactive glutamate signaling pathway and there's insufficient GABA production or activity. And this contributes to the hyperactivity, the hyperarousal, the being impulsive, and not being able to emotionally regulate, which is often also why when people with ADHD, if they have things like, remember when we were kids, things that had like MSG in them, because it's monosodium glutamate, or if people have anything with MSG in it, that is actually more glutamate that actually, so then you're getting more. So if with someone with ADHD, they don't need more glutamate. And so looking at things like with food that are high glutamate foods and getting off them is really important, and reducing the amount of glutamate foods, and then going, okay, what do we need for GABA? So we need the body synthesizes GABA from glutamate, but we need B6. Again, you'll hear me talk about B6 a lot with neurotransmitters. It's really important. And we also need magnesium. Foods that support GABA production are fermented foods, green tea, which contains another amino acid called L-theanine, which supports GABA production, magnesium-rich foods. A lot of people who have ADHD are very deficient in magnesium or magnesium absorption as well. And so looking at this has come back to diet. If you haven't got, and when we're talking about diet, I'm going to talk a bit more about the gut in a minute, but when you're deficient in a lot of these things, then you're not going to be able to make the correct levels of neurotransmitters, right? So magnesium rich foods, all your leafy greens, almonds, pumpkin seeds, anything that's really like living foods, like leafy greens are very high in magnesium. Serotonin is the other neurotransmitter I want to talk about, because it's produced in the brain and the gut, and it also influences mood. It's that feel-good neurotransmitter. It makes us feel more emotionally stable. So people with depression are often not having enough access to serotonin, or the serotonin's not binding correctly, or we're not producing enough in the gut. And it can create feelings of depression. And so to balance ADHD, we actually also need to balance serotonin, which is, we're going to talk about the gut as well. We're going to talk about that in a minute. The other thing that's really important when we're talking about all these neurotransmitters is the impact of trauma, emotional dysregulation from a trauma perspective, in terms of, okay, if I'm in that heightened state of alarm, so trauma and stress, I actually use trauma and stress interchangeably, because when I'm working with people, and what I know to be true is, when we are in that heightened state of alarm, a lot of it comes from our perceived perceptions of the world, and it's what I call background alarm. And so background alarm is, it's actually, I'm in a constant state of, I don't feel safe in my body. And I learnt that from when I was younger, because it wasn't okay for me to be myself, or my emotional needs were not met, or my physical needs were actually literally threatened, and it was not safe. And I was maybe walking on eggshells, or I had to adapt, or my parents didn't actually know how to emotionally regulate themselves, and I felt I had to change and adapt and respond. That creates that being in that fight or flight state. And so we've got this background alarm running. And so when you've got background alarm running, you've got higher levels of cortisol that is your baseline. Throw in then life. So job, email, social media, life, relationships, and then all the unresolved trauma mixed in with that, which is all our wounding, things that are not, and we're in that highly reactive state. And so that stress response that's always kind of on the go is there, and then we are not able to respond appropriately to stress. And so I talk about this a lot. If you've heard of any of Gabor Mate's talk about, I highly recommend you Google him if you haven't heard him. He's got amazing books, but he talks about ADHD being a trauma response. And so ADHD is real, and the biochemistry response to it is real, but it's also how our bodies learnt to adapt to survive, to be in that hypervigilant state. Sometimes it wasn't safe for us to relax and sit down, and we had to kind of like be going between things, or feel like we were always on edge, and it's like that's our nervous system response. So then when we're talking about that, we're talking about cortisol and the prolonged stress that increases our cortisol levels, and it amplifying this emotional dysregulation. And so it's, the way that I like to explain it is, it's like we've got these little scabs on our arms that were, if you've ever had a scab on your arm, or you've hurt your foot, and someone might come and bump you or step on your foot, and they've got no idea about that, and then you've got like a broken toe. And someone in life, like for example in a relationship, or a relationship in a job, or children, come on and they keep bumping up against your broken toe, and you're already in that heightened state of alarm because you've got the background alarm, and you keep reacting. But the trigger isn't about that moment. It's actually like, oh my God, it's actually bringing up all my wounding. And so we're like operating from this space of, it's not safe, constant lack of safety. And so it's really important that we actually have to learn to create safety in the body. And I do that with people by teaching them how to access those parts that actually ultimately don't feel safe in the first place, aka inner child, different parts, and having conversations with those parts and asking them and being like, hey, what do you need? And what do you need to feel safe? And this is where it's also known as reparenting, where you can talk to those parts and be like, yeah, honey, it's actually okay. Now, if you do this over time, what happens is the whole body starts to relax and starts to feel safer, and the nervous system, the cortisol levels start to slowly drop. And so then your pathways start to respond differently, because your nervous system's in much more of a safe space, right? Because when we're in that background alarm, we've got this dopamine dysregulation, and then the dopamine dysregulation is also the dopamine, and a lot of with the dopamine is, they say it's to do with the transporters. There's this line of thought that it's like to do with the transporters in the brain. And so it's not necessarily with the dopamine, it's to do with the transport, and that the dopamine gets there too quick and it doesn't last. And so hence people are always looking for that quick dopamine fix. That's one. And then the norepinephrine overload, which is heightened arousal, anxiety, stress. And so that worsens all the symptoms. Yeah. So when we don't feel safe, there's that stress response, and the cortisol pushes everything and creates the dysregulation to be worse. So I'm not going to go further more into that, but it's just to give you some insight. I really recommend going and listening. If you go, I might put in the show notes just below here, like the link with Gabor Mate, and he talks about ADHD and a trauma response. He's a beautiful, like, just listening to his voice is soothing, I think. But go and listen, because it will help you understand. It's like, oh, okay, all right, I can't just look at it. He actually was diagnosed with ADHD. I quite believe that if I went and got diagnosed with ADHD, I probably would have been diagnosed with it. I've never been diagnosed. But what I realized was, when I started practicing as a nutritionist, was I started seeing the symptoms that my clients were having that had been diagnosed with ADHD, and I was like, oh my God, I can so relate to you right now and everything you're going through. And what I have noticed is, since my nervous system has become more regulated, and I've addressed neurotransmitters imbalances, because I've understood neurotransmitters, I've done the gut work, I've actually found that I can focus a lot more. I'm in a lot more flow. My symptoms of being in freeze or not being able to focus, is a lot better than what it used to be. Like, it's night and day. And so that it just kind of goes to show, and that's also what I experience with my clients when I work with them. It's like their symptoms do definitely start to improve. They start to feel better. They start to get better energy because of the way that we're working. And one of the ways that we do work on is talking about that gut-brain connection. And the gut-brain connection is really important when we're talking about the neurotransmitter balance, because we have this nerve that's called the vagus nerve that travels from our brain to all our organs. And our gut communicates 10 times more this way. And I would say it's probably been updated since I have read this, but 10 times more this way than this way. So for every one message that goes from your brain down to your gut, there's 10 messages that go from your gut to your brain. And so the way that your dopamine and your serotonin and all your neurotransmitters, which are produced in the gut, get to the brain is via that vagus nerve. Now, if we're in that stress state, fight or flight, constantly feeling like we're not safe, the firing of that vagus nerve becomes like not as clear, and it becomes very difficult. And so it's called vagal tone. And so we actually can also start to do exercises to improve the firing of that vagal tone. And exercises to improve vagal tone are singing, yawning, umming, gargling. You can also do, there's like, people have devices that they plug up to, like on a Thames machine, to increase that vagal tone. And so one of the things I get people to do is do a lot of like sighing and breath work to actually increase that vagal tone. No particular type of breath work, just like doing deep breaths, like filling all the way up and letting it out like you would in a yoga class, like a big long sigh. The longer that you let that breath out, that like you're fully exhaling a balloon. Now, if you have ever had a singing lesson, they often do, or you will learn about the breath and how to use the breath. And when you breathe in, you've got to breathe from the belly, and then when you breathe out, you're like full control, but you're exhaling fully and letting all the breath out. Now, what I notice is a lot of people don't know how to breathe. They shallow breathe, and when we're in that state of stress, like shallow breathe, and they don't breathe, their rib cage just don't expand. Like, it's like, and you're not really getting any oxygen into the body. So what we want to do is actually like really just start to learn how to do big belly breaths and fully like oxygenate yourself and let it all go. And you feel amazing after you do it. Like, you do 3 of those and you feel amazing. And so your whole system drops down. Also, by the way, really good to do before you eat. So that's important to really stimulate that gut-brain connection. The other thing is talking about the microbiome. Now, when we talk about the microbiome, there's a few things. One is we've actually got two ecosystems. So we've got an ecosystem in our small intestine and we've got an ecosystem in our large intestine. The way that I explain it is the small intestine is like an ecosystem of a desert. The large intestine is the ecosystem of a rainforest. So the rainforest has a lot more diversity and species of plants, animals, everything in there. And in those ecosystems, we actually really need a really healthy balance. And if things come into that ecosystem that are not healthy, that are foreign, it starts to cause chaos in the ecosystem. So think about when rabbits were brought by Europeans to Australia, it really messed things up. Cane toads, like we can keep going. Europeans, like, so all the things, it's like we brought in all these things and it actually really messed with the ecosystem. The gut is the same. And so we need to start to learn to work with the gut, how to eat in a healthy way, how to nourish those ecosystems so we can make adequate levels of neurotransmitters so that our nervous system can function properly. This is really important. Now, I can't also talk about gut health without saying your diet's got to be good, but the way that you absorb things is also got to be good. And a lot of people go, I'm eating really well, but their absorption is shit because they're not making enough levels of stomach acid and they really have the inability to break down protein and then adequately absorb it because the gut's not healthy. So it's actually like which comes first, the chicken or the egg. And so we need good levels of vitamins and minerals for that to happen, and we need good levels of stomach acid and bile flow for us to break down our food properly and absorb it. So there's multiple things going on. Now, serotonin production, GABA, it's produced in the gut, both very important. We actually need some good strains of bacteria for GABA to be made, which is like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. And then when I go over and look at my GABA thing, we need precursors for GABA are also, it's really small, I can't read it. B6, there we go, again, of course. And you also need good levels of glutathione, which your liver can make, but often people don't also then have enough nutrients to make glutathione. You need good levels of B vitamins, not just B6, other B vitamins as well. So there's a few things in that process that I think are really important. But first of all, getting your absorption right. Then from a general nutrition viewpoint, we've got to talk about ADHD in terms of, okay, what other vitamins and minerals do we need to support that production? Omega-3 fatty acids is crucial. Omega-3 fatty acids is your fatty fish, your grass-fed beef, grass-fed eggs, and you can also get some omega-3s which have to be converted via flax seeds and chia seeds and walnuts, and some people like to take algae supplementation if they don't eat animal-based products, but it's really important that we have good levels of omega-3 for our nervous system, because our nervous system, the myelin sheath, which is that coating around the edge of our nervous system, requires good healthy fats. And if we don't, and our brain is actually 60% fat, and so if we don't have enough levels of fat and good fats, the right type of fats, the anti-inflammatory fats, which are omega-3, omega-6 fats are really easy to get. They're in everything. Omega-3 is not so much, and so there's this imbalance of fats in the system. And so we need good levels of fat to be able to actually then have a healthy functioning nervous system. Oh my God, it's amazing. So if anyone's got ADHD, one of the first things I give them will be like a really good omega supplement, because they're not getting in enough omegas. I can tell from people's diet. I don't think most people I take an omega supplement. It's really important. We also need to be making sure we're getting enough protein-rich foods, so getting the right types of protein. So making sure we're getting in enough protein, which is has things like tyrosine, so we can make our neurotransmitters. Magnesium-rich foods, which I spoke about before. Dark chocolate's also like a really rich magnesium food, and um, important for GABA, making GABA as well. B6. B6 is bananas, avocados, poultry. It's in it, and we need B6 for conversion, as I've said previously. And I often will give people different versions of B6, as well as some other precursors to support them, particularly if they've got ADHD. One, I'll talk about that in a minute. No, I won't. One of the things that I also do is I've now started doing this neurotransmitter test called the Braverman test. And you can look it up online. I think it's called bravermantest.com. You pay $20 for the thing. It used to be free. They're charging for it now. Kind of smart model. But when I have people that have some sort of neurodiversity going on, which is usually for my clients ADHD, is we go, let's do the neurotransmitter test. And when they do the neurotransmitter test, what happens is they come back and every ADHD client is low in GABA, is low in serotonin, and low in dopamine. They're pretty much low on everything. But you can tell from the quiz, it's not going to be 100% accurate, but it's a very long, extensive quiz. And then I can then go, so I can then go look at my neurotransmitter chart and go, okay, what does this person specifically need? It's not the first place I go, but along the pathways I go, yeah, right. And what I have found is it's incredibly useful to then allow there's some real different notable changes that can make a significant improvement in someone's life, just basing things off the neurotransmitter chart. But the other precursor to this is we must also get vitamins and mineral levels right. And testing this is really, really important. And you can't test every vitamin and mineral in the blood. That's my little rant. I talk about hair tissue mineral analysis a lot. I think some things need to be tested in the blood and other things need to be tested in hair tissue. But yeah, you can't get everything done in the blood because it doesn't show up, because a lot of minerals are there to buffer blood and it's not going to be accurate readings. The other thing is probiotics and prebiotics, so making sure you're getting lots of like fermented foods, vegetables, any type of plant that's got fiber in it is going to be good for the gut and feeding that gut bacteria. Prebiotic foods, if you can manage, if you don't have issues with garlic and onions and things like asparagus, are full of like fibers that are also really feed that bacteria. If you react to those, you've probably got another thing called SIBO. If you bloat and get gassy, that's a whole another conversation. But that can also tell us a lot. So unlocking and creating a holistic approach for ADHD is very much important to balance both and honor both. What's happening biochemistry, what do we need to address, and then what else do we need to do to support the nervous system. And so if you've got any questions about this, please comment below, please ask away. If you want to have a further conversation about this and be like, I'm really struggling, or I've just been diagnosed, or my medication's not working, or how do I support myself if I've been diagnosed? And I also know I don't just want to do medication. I want to take some power back and actually like take some personal responsibility and like work on the things that are going to impact it and the root causes of that. Then please reach out to me, send me a message. I will also pop in the chat. If you go to my website, there is a free health assessment that's available on there. It's about 20 minutes. Basically, we have a conversation with going, okay, what's going on for you? And we can have a talk around what does that look like if we were to work together. And it's no commitment. It's just for me to also see if you're the right fit. If you're not, I will kindly point you in the right direction. And, you know, I always try and make sure I point people in the right direction if it's not suitable. So then at least they've got another step to take in that process. And let's have a conversation about it. So if that is interest of you, like if that resonates, if what I said resonates, with the biochemical and the emotional, please don't come to me. I just say, here's my disclaimer. Please don't come to me and say, I'm only interested in the food part, because I'm not your woman. Like if you go, oh my God, I know I'm dysregulated. I know I'm really stressed. I know I've got some shit to work through. And I want to learn some practical tools, not just talking about talk therapy, because talk therapy is powerful, but it doesn't give us tools to be able to feel safe in our body on a day-to-day basis. And I know there's stuff going on, then let's have a conversation. If that's not you, that's totally okay. But please just be mindful that that is very much the way I work. I don't just treat one part of one person. That is not my jam. So let's have a conversation about it. If you've got any questions, let me know. I'd love to know what your takeaways were if you got to the end of this video, and I will see you at the next perfect time. Bye.